Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. Welcome to today's webcast. Our topic is ERP that works, breaking news and survey insights on ERP modernization. Today's webcast is brought to you by Workday and Governing Magazine. My name is John Meary. I'll be your moderator today. I'm Editor-in-Chief at the Center for Digital Government, and I'm really pleased to be with two colleagues who have some great different perspectives that are going to really help enrich the discussion around here. Joe Morris is our lead analyst at the Center for Digital Government. He'll lead off after me talking about this new survey we've just completed. There's a national survey across all different types of government, really tapping into thought leaders and operators, your peers around the country, to get you the most up-to-date information about what's happening in this area. What are people doing with respect to ERP modernization, and the move to the cloud? I'm also joined by Eileen Smith. She's a Senior Product Marketing Manager at Workday. Eileen's got a great set of experiences that she'll tell you about that are related to ERP modernization. So some real insights into the art of the possible of what can be done, how do you actually move forward, and what will make a big difference for your constituents. So a great panel. Of course, we thank all of you for tuning in, and I hope this ends up being a very informative and engaging discussion. We want to make sure that this panel discussion here stays interactive between you and the presenters. We're going to have a Q&A session at the end of closer to the top of the hour, but we want you to participate in that, and here's how you can do that. So if you have a question, you can actually type your question into the Ask a Question text area next to the video window, and then just click the Submit button. When we get to the Q&A period, we'll try to take those roughly in the order received. At this time, here's a couple other logistical notes. We recommend that you disable your pop-up blockers so that you can enjoy the full experience here. You'll see a number of widgets on the bottom of the screen as well. So during today's webinar, you can connect with your peers on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. We would encourage you to use the hashtag GovLive to connect with your peers across the governing platform via Twitter. If you experience any problems with your media player, you can select the Preferences link under the video window and then choose a different media player. If you're experiencing any other problems, there is a webcast help guide you can get to by clicking on the Help button below the video window. You can also ask us a question. We have some technical folks standing by that can help you with any questions like that. So as we jump into the presentation, what I'm going to do is just set the tone a little bit before I hand it over to Joe and tell you a little bit more about Joe and our other speaker today. So if this is your first chance at joining us for a governing event, let me just briefly introduce the magazine to you. We like to think that Governing is really the journal of record for the administrative set, those people who are between our political elected officials and the constituents that we serve. So we are here to administer government, to run it well, to execute policy, and to make sure that we achieve the many and demanding goals that our constituents have placed on us. If you're not familiar with the magazine or our other events, I definitely encourage you to get familiar at governing.com. So here's a little more about what we'll discuss today. So our topic is around ERP. We're going to talk about some of the benefits that are driving ERP modernization. In our survey, and Joe will tell you more about this, we found that 27% of jurisdictions were going to ERP modernization as a way to reduce costs, reduce capital costs, and we'll talk about some of those other ones. What are people trying to get out of this? What's the goal of ERP modernization? We certainly aren't talking about technology for technology's sake. This is a discussion really about better government and meeting the challenges that we're all facing. We'll talk a little bit about a different type of challenges, not the challenges we're facing, but the challenges that need to be negotiated on your way to ERP modernization. So there are new considerations like security, data ownership, resistance to change in organizations that will need to be overcome if you're to really achieve the vision of ERP modernization. So we'll talk about how to do that. And then finally, how to choose some of the right technologies that will meet your organization's unique needs. It's definitely true that the non-technology factors in a project often determine its success or failure, but there is a really big difference between all of the different tools and technologies that are out there on the market. And so we want to talk to you about some of the main architectural approaches and design approaches that go into some of the products out there on the market so that you can choose the ones that meet the needs of your organization the best way. Now, all of us who've read the newspaper, from the Greek economic crisis to our own challenges here in the U.S., the challenges with the euro, speculation about municipal bond bankruptcies, and all of these challenges, could definitely realize that our belt's being tightened around the world. There's no area of government, certainly within state and local education as well, that has more money than it needs right now. These ERP systems typically for our organizations are used around finance and HR, and those are they're either tracking all of our expenses, or they're helping us manage the single largest expense in most organizations, which is the human element. So government definitely needs some fresh solutions. When you look at the types of budget cuts we're being asked to take, the fact that these are sustained, these are ongoing, they're not looking like they're going to change anytime soon, we definitely need to come up with some new solutions. Business as usual is not going to get us there. Now, I've got a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek illustration here. Many of us have heard this phrase, the cloud. That's a big part of ERP modernization. We've written and been speaking about this trend for the last few years at the Center for Digital Government. Governing Magazine has covered quite a bit about this. Right now, we're at a stage where most folks are excited about moving into the cloud, but I really want to make this point that not all clouds are, quote, good clouds. So there are a lot of folks, a lot of products, a lot of software vendors, a lot of organizations that have kind of been left behind. They didn't really do the retooling in the last couple of years that they needed to do to become a true cloud player. So there's a lot of solutions that are dressed up as a cloud solution that really aren't that, or if they are in some technical sense, they're not clouds in the sense that you'll get the benefits that we're trying to look for here. A lot of people have just kind of forklifted their same old ERP systems out into someone else's data center and said, oh, hey, look, I'm in the cloud. Well, in a certain abstract sense, maybe you are, but you're not really capturing the benefits that that transition was intended to do. The reductions of cost, the increase of flexibility, they're not finding those types of things. So what we really want to do in this presentation is talk a little bit about what exactly that means. What really is the cloud, and how do we want to get there? So I'm joined, as I mentioned, by two other fantastic speakers. Joe will go first. He's our lead analyst at the Center for Digital Government. I've had the pleasure of working with Joe for more than 4 years now, and he's really, if there's data out there about something, he's got a real talent and insight for getting to it. He's definitely got his finger on the pulse of technology advancement and best practices, especially in state and local government. And we're also glad that he's here with us today because he's an engaging and very knowledgeable speaker. So he's going to be telling you about this research report. He'll be sharing this cutting-edge stuff that we've just come up with. He's got a whole set of hard numbers about who's doing what, where, why, and what the directions are. And then he'll provide some insights into those strategies and trends that are showing up from the research. Eileen Smith, as I mentioned earlier, Senior Product Marketing Manager from Workday, is going to help us define those solutions. So Joe will help you see where people are going, what they're trying to get to. Eileen's going to tell us how to get to that destination. She'll cover 10 critical requirements for cloud applications. That's a very helpful perspective about what really is, what type of cloud is actually going to cover and achieve the benefits that you're trying to achieve. what's important and what isn't when it comes to the cloud. We can't take all of the same questions and strategies and approaches that we've had in the past and just transport them over to the cloud. There are things that need to change. So there are some things that need to be more important, some things that need to be less. And then finally, how do you differentiate a true cloud solution from the, quote, imposters? I'll let her expand on that a little bit more. So without further ado, Joe Morris, I'll let you take it from here.
Perfect. Thanks, John, and thanks, everyone, for joining us. As John mentioned, we just wrapped up a comprehensive national survey on ERP modernization in government that focuses on the evolution of human resources and finance solutions within states and localities. In particular, we surveyed state and local government IT professionals to determine their point of view on finance, accounting, and HR solutions within state and local government. In total, we gathered 160 responses from our Government Technology Exchange, which is an online community of state and local CIOs and IT leaders across the nation. It's my pleasure today to share with you some of our findings, and I think you'll find them particularly informative, both in terms of what state and local leaders are pursuing right now, but more importantly, some of the lessons learned and their concerns going forward. So first, let's take a look at what's going on right now with existing ERP implementations. What we do know is ERP implementations are actively being pursued across the nation. In fact, at the Center for Digital Government, we're constantly tracking procurements. We're looking at future procurements, and we're starting to see a trend where we're seeing significant rates of IT modernization as it relates to HR and finance, much for the same reasons that John mentioned in his introduction. The fact that state and localities are under increasing pressure for greater fiscal transparency, greater levels of government efficiency, we're seeing a much stronger push for enterprise financial systems. And in fact, when we looked in our survey, the typical functionality supported with regard to these systems tends to be HR, procurement, budgeting, and financials. In fact, 48% of our respondents identified that as their supported line of business. You can see that was closely followed by health and human services and public safety and law enforcement. And that tends to ring true, of course, what we see across state and local government. We've got a significant amount of reform going on with regard to health and human services as states and localities respond to the Healthcare Reform Act, but also in terms of general modernization in that space. So that makes sense again from there. And finally, we're starting to see an uptick in activity from public safety and law enforcement as they look to a new reality that's much more collaborative, much more focused on shared services and multi-jurisdictional approach. We're seeing IT investments, particularly in the area of ERP in that sector as well. What was probably most interesting to me was that state and local agencies are saddled with legacy ERP systems that are long past their expiration date and are no longer supporting their business needs. State and local IT decision makers listed system age. 41% of our respondents listed system age as their top driver for modernization. I was mentioning to my colleagues on this call before we all joined you that I was just coming off reading an account of a local government entity that's looking at replacing their system because their last government employee that put the system together is finally set to retire, and that's forcing them to modernize their system. Well, we dug deeper. Our survey found that nearly 25% of our respondents are operating with systems greater than 10 years old. And when we've looked at our national surveys, in addition to these, our digital states, cities, and county surveys, we consistently see financial systems, HR system modernizations trending to the top of state and local investment priorities. So it's no surprise that we're seeing system age and the fact that we're dealing with some older systems in this space be a big push for why states and localities are in the process of modernization. In our survey, respondents were asked to describe the status of their ERP projects. Our responses illustrate that states and localities are currently busy tackling ERP, with 53% of our respondents reporting that they've either recently implemented an ERP or are in the process of implementation. Finally, we have another 27% of state and local government leaders that indicate that they're currently in the middle of an active ERP ERP procurement, or currently considering ERP investment in the future. So given that, you're going to see a consistent stream of your peers that are in the middle of modernization as we look forward. Well, another, probably the most shocking finding from our survey was the fact that so many of your peers, and hopefully not many of you on the phone, have had to learn the hard way when it came to these large-scale implementations, either with regard to how long these implementations took or how costly they are. And we're going to dig a little deeper into that. But what we did find is that traditional ERP and HR solutions are long and costly. Of course, that the size and scope of the initiative varies depending on the size of your jurisdiction, the various lines of business that it may support, or the number of modules or customization that may be required. But our survey found that traditional ERP implementations are taking too long. 28% of our respondents, as you can see on this slide, when asked how long did it take your organization to procure and implement your existing ERP, indicated that it took over 2 years to finish out the project. States and localities don't have that time or money. Even when you see that we're looking at 29% that are north of a year to close to 2 years. This is not the time that state and local governments have when it comes to greater pressure for government efficiency, when it comes to better accounts of spending that governments or their elected leaders can afford to spend on these types of initiatives. Finally, we had 17% of our respondents indicate that their costs were north of $10 million. And I want to break that down a little bit on my next slide when we looked at the overall project costs that are associated with some of these projects that tend to take over 2 years to implement. As you well know, traditional ERP initiatives are multi-year and, in fact, multi-million-dollar initiatives for most governments. When we surveyed states and localities about their total cost for modernization, 17% of our respondents indicated they had costs exceeding $10 million. We had 17% of our respondents indicate that their costs ranged anywhere from $500,000 to $2 million. Frankly, when these findings were the most shocking. When you looked at the color from some of our qualitative responses, these are initiatives that in many times outlive maybe the CIO or IT director that started implementing them. So you're dealing with many challenges, both fiscal challenges, both cultural challenges in the workplace, but also the fact that these projects are so costly that there's a change of leadership in the middle that tends to make many of these projects end up in the newspaper for the wrong reasons. So what's driving states and localities to modernize these costly systems? Well, the top reasons for moving to a new solution are improved productivity. 58% of our respondents indicated that the desire for better productivity is what's pushing them to modernize these systems. You looked forward and you saw the integration of data and business information listed by 51% of our respondents, better decision-making, 41%, and system age, 41%. The data that I've listed out here illustrates that state and localities have a variety of motivations to move to a new system. However, improved productivity and the desire to empower employees with correct information on payroll, procurement, and budgeting trended to the top because it can improve decision-making and drive down overall costs. And I think that resonates much with what John mentioned at the very beginning. As all of your belts are collectively being tightened, there's a desire to find solutions that are more quickly to implement, but more importantly, have long-term benefits. Because it's not about the bits and the bytes and the technology. It's about what can we do with the system to make improved decision-making and improve the overall experience by both your constituents and by your employees. Based on the hard lessons learned, whether it be the implementation length, how costly the projects have been in the past, when asked about traditional concerns when implementing traditional ERP systems, IT leaders across the nation have expressed a variety of real concerns. Their largest concern is systems integration and consulting costs. Nearly half of our respondents listed that as being their primary challenge. Of course, it's followed very closely by staff support and data migration at 42%. IT and business leaders must ensure that they have the complete buy-in of their staff and the technical expertise necessary to successfully implement an ERP system. That came up consistently through our responses, the desire to make sure that given that these systems take so long and are so costly, they have to ensure that they've got the right staff and the right expertise in place to make that rollout. Finally, given that they've experienced so many hard lessons, 40% are concerned with the fact that so much customization is required with the existing systems that are out in the market right now to make them work in the public sector. And that's the ongoing resources that are required to maintain, update, and continually adjust these systems is not sustainable given the financial climate that we all find ourselves in. Finally, we had nearly a quarter of our respondents indicate that the overall risk of failure, given the fact that you've got large timelines, high investment prices, it kind of just makes them shy away from implementing an existing ERP. And it's really shocking to me when you looked at these concerns with the length of the implementations that were listed. The fact that it was evident to me that our survey respondents were speaking based on some real hard lessons learned that they unfortunately had to learn the hard way. Continuing that thought next step further, we asked for those that have implemented those ERPs and potentially learned those lessons the hard way, have you experienced any of the following situations during ERP implementation? And our survey findings here make it evident, like I said, that they've certainly experienced it the hard way. Nearly half of our respondents have experienced integration challenges with their existing systems. System integration services are often, like I said, one of the most costly areas during one of these ERP implementations. And given that, it may be reasonable that 38% of our respondents experienced higher costs and scope modifications and change orders to extend their projects. What you see here is a group of IT leaders from across the nation that have experienced changes to their procurements, higher than expected costs and integration challenges, and more importantly, 35% leadership change. I mentioned that earlier, the fact that so many of these projects take over 2 years, and when you look at the average tenure of a state and local CIO, in many cases, even the higher level leadership is changing over in that point. And when every procurement that we see in the public sector coming under greater scrutiny, the idea that to do an ERP implementation the right way, get a win under your belt in a timely fashion, seems to be driving the desire for a new type of solution, a new way of thinking when it comes to these implementations. And we're starting to see that change, as John mentioned, with the fact that we're seeing people investigate a new movement to the cloud as it relates to these types of solutions. For all of you that are looking at potential best practices when it comes to not having to learn those lessons the hard way, we asked our audience, what are the primary best practices that can ensure a successful IT implementation? Nearly 70% of our respondents indicate setting realistic expectations is the top best practice. So working with your elected leaders, working with your staff and your end users to get them to understand why you're doing this, understand the timelines and the expectations, get their cultural buy-in by their end users, another very strong 53%. And finally, executive sponsorship, understanding that your mayor, your governor, your department or commissioner head has your back with regard to these initiatives, because either way they're going to require a lot of collaboration. 34% listed better vendor partnerships, and finally 31% better business case and ROI planning. We're starting to see those all these things tie into setting the realistic expectations when it comes to the return on investment, when it comes to your end users, and getting the cultural buy-in from both your end users and your executive sponsors are what ensures a successful ERP implementation at the end of the day. But where do we go from here? Throughout our survey findings, it's clear and evident that traditional ERP implementations have been costly and lengthy. Many of our government respondees feel that the existing solutions were not built with government in mind. The fact that much of the ERP solutions out in the market are built primarily for businesses' needs and not necessarily tailored to government. Certainly saw that trending to the top as well. So it's reasonable to conclude that state and local government agencies need better flexibility from their existing ERP and HR solutions. After dealing with those costly challenges that were traditionally associated with ERP, leaders are beginning to think in new and exciting ways, and one of those ways is in the cloud. Nearly 30% of our respondents are currently in the cloud or considering investment in the cloud to lower their implementation costs. Cloud-based HR and finance systems are beginning to gain momentum within state and local government organizations. As you can see here, 27% of our respondents are considering the cloud to reduce their overall capital expenses. Another 22% 22%, are looking to free up resources and staff and have them focus on other key missions that are relevant to their business needs. Beyond that, we're looking for faster deployments, greater scalability, and more stable investments. So the fact that we can move into the cloud can free up resources as well as free up staff to meet future needs and have more predictable spending are big motivators why we're seeing state and local government right now migrate over to the cloud, look for a more flexible solution, and look to drive down that implementation timeline, given that they don't have 2 years to spend on a traditional ERP implementation. They're looking for something faster, smoother, that's going to line up to their needs. That doesn't mean that, like John mentioned earlier, there aren't some concerns when it comes to cloud. And while state and local leaders are looking for speedier deployments and lower costs, those examining HR and finance in the cloud are challenged and looking at and concerned by security. And I know that our next speaker is going to certainly cover some of that. With 66% of our respondents indicating that security, they want to ensure they've got proper security. Data ownership concerns are trending to the top as well. 52% of our respondents wanting to ensure that the proper protocols are in place with regard to their data ownership. So when they do examine a cloud-based provider for state and local governments and ERP systems, there are concerns you do and things you want to look out for. Do you want to ensure that your third-party provider has passed the necessary security audits and certifications and has the proper protocols in place? But I think when we see nearly 30% of the market beginning to migrate to the cloud, the question of whether the cloud's appropriate or not seems to be addressed now, and it's a question of how soon are they moving to the cloud. From where John mentioned earlier, we've done a tremendous amount of research based in this survey and in other publications, and I know that we firmly believe from where we sit that the cloud is certainly the future for the deployment model for these HR solutions, and you can certainly start to see that as we looked at this survey of 160 government officials and where they're going in the future. So some of the key takeaways from where we sit here based on this survey. Again, HR and payroll and purchasing are the most commonly implemented ERP functions. 43% of our respondents feel that legacy ERP offerings in the market are built with the public sector needs in mind, but are not fully tailored to where they need to go with regard to costs and scope changes. Nearly 40% of our respondents, and I'm sure many of you on the phone today, have experienced higher than expected costs when implementing an ERP system. We've got a big push here with regard to greater integration of data and productivity being the driving force behind why states and localities are looking to modernize their systems. Existing implementations have been costly and lengthy, and many feel that their existing solutions are not built with government in mind. Existing systems and new systems need to have greater flexibility and better means to integrate data. And with that said, I want to transition back to John.
Great. Excellent insights there, Joe. And I think what I'd like to do here is really move over to Eileen and share some of these, now that you've heard where people are going, why they're going there, and what they're trying to get out of it, to kind of move into what is it that they can do and how do you kind of get the right technologies in place to achieve these benefits. So a little bit more about Eileen Smith before she starts. So after receiving her master's degree from Virginia Tech, she spent the first few years of her career working for 2 large state entities where she worked on and ran grant-funded programs. In the last 20 years, she's worked for a variety of technology companies that cater to the education and government space. As I mentioned, she's currently the Senior Manager of Product Marketing for Education and Government Business at Workday, which provides finance and HR solutions in the cloud. So, Eileen, take it from here.
Thanks, John, and thanks, Joe, for that fantastic research. The data is really illuminating and shows some significant trends that I'll try to hit upon in my section. Since Joe's data points to researching solutions, specifically cloud solutions for finance and HR, I'd like to discuss 10 critical requirements that organizations and agencies who are thinking of moving to the cloud should keep in mind. These 10 requirements are all attributes of cloud solutions that will propel your organization forward quickly and, most importantly, safely. The first requirement that you should look for in a cloud solution is true multi-tenancy. Multi-tenancy is just exactly what it sounds like. It's multiple tenants in an apartment building instead of a single homeowner in a single family home. In technology terms, multi-tenancy means that the vendor is operating a single production environment for all of its customers. This model offers three distinct advantages. The first is that all customers are on the same release. Having worked for a couple of different software providers, I can tell you that the first question that customers always ask each other at user conferences is, what release are you on? That's further exacerbated by their hardware system, their database management system, their network configuration, etc. Having everyone on the same release means that no customer is left behind and that the cutting-edge enhancements provided by the vendor are always at the ready. The second advantage of multi-tenancy is community collaboration. In the legacy on-premise world, customers have limited latitude to collaborate with their peers because everyone's on a different version of the software, along with various customizations and underlying infrastructure. In a multi-tenant cloud environment, every customer is on the same version, facilitating a whole new level of communication, collaboration, and sharing of best practices and reports, business processes, integrations, and more. And finally, thinking like a vendor like I am from my selfish perspective, this allows the vendor to concentrate on only one release, thus focusing all development on the same thing, not back releases, not forward releases, not releases for various databases, not having to quality assure multiple databases, multiple platforms. And what this translates into for customers of cloud solutions is faster product development for them. The second thing you should look for in a cloud solution is regularly delivered vendor-managed updates. Every Friday in the mail, I receive a magazine that I subscribe to. It comes to me whether I have read the previous version from Friday before or not. Sometimes I can't wait to get my hands on this magazine. Other time, frankly, its content doesn't appeal to me and it languishes on my bookshelf. What the weekly subscription provides me is a cost of 1/5 of what it would cost if I bought this magazine at the grocery store. I budget for it once a year. I pay for it. I never have to worry about more payments throughout the year, and I'm updated at all times and always in the know on the latest trends. Cloud solutions are just like a magazine subscription. With a cloud solution, you're always on the latest release. You continually innovate at your own pace, and you eliminate the costly and disruptive upgrade cycle. We all know that in government, upgrades typically take months and months, sometimes years to accomplish. Upgrades instead installed by a vendor over a weekend are rather astonishing, but with cloud applications, that's the reality. The state of Nebraska, who is a Workday customer, has 18,000 employees. They converted from multiple systems into our system. One of the systems they converted from was over 20 years old. They went live on a Friday and actually received an update from us that weekend. On Monday when they logged in, they didn't notice that they'd received an update. It was completely non-intrusive. They get to choose when they wanted to use that latest upgrade or whether they didn't want to use it at all. The third thing you should look for in a cloud application is seamless integration on demand. Key modernization driver from the CDG survey that we just saw in John's data is the integration of data and business information. He cited that 51% of respondents mentioned this. Cloud applications are built in the last few years and are unified at their core. The transactions flow from one point to another seamlessly. There's no handoffs between finance and HCM. The transactions simply make their way through the solution. In addition, they're painlessly integrated with existing on-premise and on-demand applications. We realize and other vendors realize that no solution is going to do everything that a customer needs it to do, and cloud solutions make integration seamless and invisible to the user. A couple of our education and government customers at Workday have very complex situations that require many, many integrations. I'll cite specifically Cornell University, who happens to be both a private and a public institution. And as such, they have many third-party applications that they need to integrate with, many in Albany at the state level. They're using the Workday Integration Cloud to ensure this piece of their implementation goes smoothly. Some of these integrations built by the vendor, some of them built by Cornell for their site-specific requirements. The fourth thing you should look for in a cloud application is world-class data center and security. When examining the HR and finance solutions in the cloud, the CDG study found that security at 66% was the top concern for state and local leaders. When examining a cloud-based provider, you'll want to ensure that the provider has passed various third-party security audits and certifications and has the proper protocols to ensure that your data is secure and compliant with federal, state, and local laws. Due to the fact that cloud vendors have hundreds of customers on the same tenant of their software, the provider should be able to offer world-class data security and privacy, frankly, better than its clients can do on their own at no additional cost. That should include physical, network, application, and data level security, as well as full backup and, let's not forget, disaster recovery. The provider should be compliant with security-oriented laws and auditing programs such as I've noted here on the slide. I actually attended a conference last month where the question of security came up in a roundtable discussion. An individual in the audience actually stated that his organization had moved to the cloud because the vendor's security was so much better than his on-premise. He noted that his agency, with the legacy solution that they had in place, that individuals are actually able to access the database directly, and that would never happen in his new cloud application. The fifth thing that you should look for in a cloud application is business-driven configurability. The survey that John just went over, and Joe, just went over, found that one of the largest concerns that agencies have with replacing their existing legacy ERP solutions is the staff support that traditional ERP solutions require, and this was a 45% notation. Cloud applications actually turn this objection on its head because in and of themselves, cloud applications are configured by business users, not by the folks in IT. At the state of Nebraska, one of their chief drivers for changing systems was that the requirements and needs in their state changed constantly. They were forever having to call IT to get their help. Now with Workday, they actually utilize our business process definition, and users in the impacted offices make the changes themselves. Whether it's a person in HR making changes in HR, whether it's a person in finance making changes in finance. Could be a new employee, could be a termination, could be handling expenses. All of these have been taken care of in the impacted offices. Our sixth requirement is a high-performance, sustainable architecture. The CDG survey again found that 25% of the agencies who participated in the study are operating systems greater than 10 years old, which makes them susceptible on so many fronts. The cloud application provider should maintain a high-performance IT infrastructure, which includes data centers, databases, operating systems, etc. Should have stellar IT operations, security, maintenance, performing tuning. In addition, cloud providers in many cases provide something called BYOD, or bring your own device. What HHS worker wouldn't like to be able to request time off or log a sick day through their iPhone? Workers these days are expecting to use their own devices to access records, and in the case of systems that are 10 years old or more, that's just not possible. Brown University, who recently went live on Workday, is not only using our Bring Your Own Device methodology, but in conformance with Section 508 requirements, is expanding its use of iPads with screen reader technology for their employees with sight impairments. We're almost there. We're on number 7 now. Hang with me. The The predictable total cost of ownership model is our 7th thing you should look for in cloud applications. The last time I leased a car, the associated maintenance was included. So all I needed to worry about was my monthly payment and gas, although worrying about gas has definitely taken on a life of its own these days. Leasing a car, however, is dramatically different than purchasing a car. The car is yours, the upkeep is yours, the headache is yours when you buy the car. Cloud solutions are definitely akin to leasing the car. You have a predictable cost outlay, your car's in tip-top shape without you having to budget for maintenance and for updates. There should be no surprise cost with cloud applications. Implementation costs should be predictable. Subscription-based pricing should have no hidden fees. No investment should be required for hardware and software license fees. Stephen John, the CIO at my company, has a saying that goes something like this. One thing that can kill a CIO's reputation is surprises, particularly surprises with lots of dollar signs, he says. With cloud applications, CIOs can determine costs for the next 5 years. John, could you push the slides forward for me, please?
Sure, no problem.
Critical requirement number 8 is faster deployment. Again, back to the survey. The CDG survey found that traditional ERP implementations take too long, with 28% of the states and localities spending over 24 months to procure and implement their ERP. Just like Joe said, I have to say his exact words, states and localities just do not have that sort of time or money. After working for a couple different vendors, I can easily state that without the investment and installation of hardware and software, which frankly in and of itself can take up to 6 months, organizations can start looking at demonstration data in cloud solutions on day 1, and from there we'll glean ideas on how to implement at their specific site. And I really can't talk about that enough. That whole implementation process of getting the infrastructure, getting the hardware, getting the software, and getting all those planets aligned on site just takes so much more time than anyone ever thinks about. Just from our own customer base, Brown implemented our full HCM solution along with our brand new time tracking module. They actually went live on full HCM and went live with time tracking a week later, and they did that in just over a year. Our 9th reason is control. Control is so important when examining HR and finance in the cloud. And the survey found that data ownership at 52% is one of the top concerns. Actually, Joe, I think it's the first concern. To address that, when looking at cloud applications, you should look for solutions that provide organizations complete control of their data, even though the data is located off-premise. While organizations are freed of application maintenance with cloud vendors, there should be no roadblocks or bureaucracy that hinder the ability of authorized individuals to import, export, purge, and archive data to and from the application without having to first contact the vendor. Cloud applications, furthermore, should provide scheduled audit reports directly to their customers about the data residing in their application. And finally, we're here, number 10, liberation from non-strategic IT issues. The CDG survey found that cloud-based HR and finance systems are beginning to gain momentum within state and local government as organizations look for solutions that specifically can free up resources and staff. Cloud applications should free up not only CIOs and their teams, but office staff as well from time and energy spent on non-strategic back-office operations. Today and in the future, the most highly valued leaders, the ones that become heroes in the business, are those who are closely aligned with strategic business initiatives and drive the projects that support those initiatives. Furthermore, leaders are staffing their teams with people who have that same understanding. Another customer of ours had 8 data entry employees who worked in their HR office. Their entire job was entering new applications into the system. those folks do not have a job anymore. They actually have a much more strategic job. They are dedicated to analyzing data and doing strategic reports because the folks who input the information are the prospective employees and employees now. And lastly, just a quick word about Workday. Workday was founded in 2005. You'll see that currently in 2012 we're on update 17 of our solution. Every year our customers receive 3 updates from us, as we talked about with this multi-tenant world. The 2008 release of our software was financials. That followed HR. Our next release was payroll with, of course, a lot of other things, including mobile. In 2010, we added talent and HCM, and Carnegie Mellon joined us. In 2011, actually Nebraska joined us, as well as Brown, and we worked on our integration cloud and Workday for the iPad. And this year we added time tracking, a lot of other cool features, including grants management and funds accounting, and we also have been nominated or named Best Place to Work for the last 5 years. That's what those little black dots are at the bottom. Okay, back to you, John.
Great. Thank you, Eileen and Joe, for sharing these different but really aligned perspectives. I think you're coming from a different place, but you've got some really excellent stuff to share here. We have a few questions already from the audience, so I will start to pose those to our panelists. If you have a question you haven't asked yet, feel free to ask it to us. Just type it into that Ask a Question box. One of the more common questions is whether we can get copies of these materials. You'll actually receive an email out to the address you used to register that will have a full archive of the presentation, so you'll get the presentation materials, the audio, and the link to this. So if you'd like to share it with a colleague who wasn't able to join you live, you'll have those materials. We'll also send some results from the surveys, so you get a little bit more in-depth coverage of that in documentation form. So without further ado, we'll jump to the first question here. And I'm going to actually pose this question first to Eileen, and then Joe, you may want to weigh in as well if you have any thoughts. So the questioner is asking, the solution we have in place is currently 22 years old. Could our employees make the jump to a cloud solution? So Eileen, what are your thoughts on that first?
That is a great question. One of our customers who went live a couple months ago actually was worse off than that, if you can believe it. They were coming off of a 30-year-old system.
Nice.
And what they did was just a lot of organizational development with their staff. They put a lot of signs up. They did a lot of training sessions. It was an astronomical leap for their staff members, but what I can tell you is that they are successfully using the system. Everyone enjoys using the system. Everyone actually can use the system. Before, not everyone could even get on it. So they made a light year jump when they moved to their new system with Workday, and they're doing just great. It did take some organizational development and change for sure, but they did it, and I'm sure your organization can too.
Excellent. Another question here that I think would be good for you, Eileen, so I'll pose this to you, is we have a legacy supply chain solution at my agency. How can we integrate that into a cloud solution?
Well, John, most solutions that are in the cloud have to talk to somebody else's solution. So I would say that 99% of them come with integration tools. Ours comes with something called an integration cloud, which allows people on site or the folks at our company to integrate our solution with various solutions on your agency site. So I would imagine that your supply chain would be just like somebody else's supply chain. We've integrated with many of those before. So whether it's us or someone else, that is very possible, and it will be seamless to you because it's in the cloud.
Excellent. That's, I'm sure, a concern that's on a lot of folks' minds. Joe, question for you about the data. Anne is asking here, do you have this type of data broken out by other kind of slices, like state only or local only, or government size, or is that not available for folks?
We can certainly do that, but we do have a full report coming out on this that we'll be following up with everyone who attended and registered for today's webinar. So you'll get some additional breakdowns and some more context on the data in a follow-up email from us shortly.
Excellent. Well, that's great. So, Ann, good news for you there. You'll have a lot more detail, and then if you have questions, you could certainly come back to us with those questions. Eileen, we'll go back to you here. If all, Linda's asking here, if all users on a cloud ERP solution platform are on the same release of the software, does that allow for any customizations to meet specific needs for that customer?
That's a great question, Linda. Thank you very much. Yes, pretty much all cloud vendors allow for all sorts of customization. We actually we talk about it in terms of configuration, not customization. Our solution, like I mentioned, is used by over 350 different places at the same time. They're all using it in completely different ways. There's business processes that they have configured for their site. There are user fields that they have configured for their site. So you might go to 5 different places that all have our solution. They look inherently the same, but they're operating in very different manners.
Excellent. Well, we've got a few more minutes left. If you haven't asked a question, feel free to type one into that Ask a Question box there. Again, you'll receive more detailed information in the archive. Joe, you mentioned in your presentation, and we had talked a little before this about this brain drain of folks retiring who are the subject matter experts on the software that's been in place for years and years. How optimistic are you overall that folks are coming to terms with that when you look out at the survey data and your experiences with folks?
Well, it's certainly a major driver behind their modernization. I was saying someone referred to it recently as the silver tsunami that's taking over state and local government, and it's a real challenge. You saw by our data that having the right staff and staff expertise is key, and we're seeing many of those individuals across state and local government retire that have the existing systems or implemented them and have the expertise. And we're seeing a growing desire to do things like move to the cloud and modernize the systems, implement systems that are more flexible. And you got to 25 to 30 years, like Eileen said, of the existing systems. And state and local governments are trying to build a system now that is faster and easier to implement, but flexible enough to meet their long-term future needs as well. And I think that's why we're seeing a bigger push to the cloud.
Excellent. We've got a question here from Wayne that I'll direct to Eileen here. I've got a couple thoughts on it myself too. Is it difficult to convert from a current Tier 1 ERP solution, I'm assuming here, into the cloud? My perspective on this would be that anybody who's talking about an ERP conversion, it's not an easy project, but it does, that move from kind of a normal ERP system into a cloud is definitely doable, and that's where all of the folks that are currently there now are going and going quite successfully. So, Eileen, what are your thoughts on that? Is that an easy or a doable transition?
I agree wholeheartedly with your thoughts, John. It's doable. No implementation is easy, but with cloud solutions, you have a lot of tools that really are not available with your regular legacy implementations of ERP solutions. All I can tell you is we have over 350 customers who are live on our software. I would venture a guess that well over 70% of them came from a solution very much like yours, Wayne, and they're all living and breathing and still here to talk about it. So, yes, you can do it.
Excellent. So there's a question here from Paul that's a great example of one of the themes we touched on, which is some things are more important, some things are less important. This is one that is always important. Paul's question is, could you talk a little bit about disaster recovery? That's probably something that's on people's minds when they think about the cloud, saying, well, I know how I would do that on-premise. How do I do that in the cloud? That's also interesting because it's not, the way you think about that's differently. You no longer have the system co-located physically with your office. So if there's a flood that takes out your office, it doesn't necessarily take out your system, I guess. So Eileen, how do we kind of change thinking about disaster recovery now in a cloud-type environment?
Well, to answer the question, any cloud vendor worth their salt has a fantastic bullet-clad disaster recovery system under their belt. All of those different security certifications that I mentioned earlier, the ISO 27001, the SSAE 16, and the Safe Harbor, if a vendor is certified with those three vendors, you know that there is no disaster recovery that's going to be tougher than theirs. So I would just look for the real tough certifications, make sure the vendor is worth their salt on those, and disaster recovery is a big, huge part of that. I can tell you that for sure.
Yeah, and I think that, the ability to have, in general, I think you're seeing more and more folks looking to have these systems hosted by people who, are in the cloud so that they can get better disaster recovery results. So that's definitely a great response there, Eileen. So here's a question from Jim. What advice do you have for customers with major data migration needs, particularly when the data comes from very old legacy or COBOL systems? So Eileen, maybe you can talk from some of your experience. How do you approach historical data conversion when you're kind of moving off into the cloud?
Well, one of our customers who just went live over the summer found that the biggest thing that they should have done that they didn't do well was clean their data before they moved it over. So that would be my first recommendation. Moving dirty data over into a new system really doesn't help anybody. You just further push your bad data through to another system. So that's number one. Clean up your data, take a real hard look at it. Decide how much you want to pull over. Decide how much with your regulations that you're falling under, how much you need to pull over. And then with the tools from the vendors, it's not that hard anymore. I think, if you've done this the last time 30 years ago, you're going to be very, very pleased with the ease which occurs these days.
Excellent. So not easy work, but much easier maybe than the last one we went through. So that's a good thing to look forward to there. We're just about at the top of the hour, so we'll take one last question here from Ann. I'll pose this to you, Eileen. You're very popular today, so we've got quite a few questions here, and then we'll wrap up. So which states are currently Workday clients and potential clients? So potential clients you probably won't want to address on a webinar, but what are some of the places where you're seeing success in government with Workday?
Well, we have the fortunate client base of a couple of states, some counties, locals. The one that I would push you towards for conversations when you see them at a conference next is the state of Nebraska. They have 18,000 employees. They moved from a variety of systems. Their HHS group, their unemployment group, everybody moved onto their HR system, and they did it with a couple starts and stops in 9 months. They're very happy with it, and they also utilize our Section 508 flexibility a whole lot for their individuals who are sight impaired. So that's a great customer for you to talk to.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Eileen, and Joe. Thank you very much for your perspective. This research is really helpful. For all of you who've joined, I think you'll really want to check out that full report that Joe mentioned. This is great statistics, not just to help you make decisions, but these are also excellent things that you can cite and quote in business cases and justifications as you're trying to think about how you educate your folks in your agency and decision makers to move forward. So this is very much data that we hope you can and will use in your daily life, so feel free to do that as you see necessary. Thank you very much to everyone who tuned in today. We've had a great response and appreciate all of the questions and the attendees who stuck with us here to the end. If you enjoyed this, we hope you check out governing.com to find some other online events and publications and articles that will help you move government forward. We really appreciate everyone's involvement today, and with that, we'll wrap up the webinar. Bye-bye.